giving this as an approach to OER development, and I think that I'm looking more at the idea of OER assembly, and to get away from the idea of developing courses and into a different approach of assembling courses. But before I start, I want to talk about where we're going with all this development, and I want to make a pitch for mobile learning. And what's happening, and we see it in our organization and all over, is that people are still designing for a PC or possibly a laptop, or even for paper, and then transferring it over. And what I'm suggesting today is that we're already in the mobile world, and it's a lot easier to design for mobile and then put it on a PC rather than designing for a PC and putting it on a mobile. And I think that we have to start thinking in those terms, that these mobile devices are with us. There's 1.6 billion internet connections in the world, out of a world population of 6.8 billion. We can expect this figure, both proportionately and in total numbers, to go up dramatically in the next few years. 1/4 of the world's population has access to the internet. The world is going mobile. Mobile learning is now a very real possibility. We're not talking about future scenarios anymore. But the fact is that there's 3.4 billion mobile devices. And even the simplest mobile phone that you get today is more powerful than the personal computer you had 5 or 10 years ago. There's 1.3 billion mobile internet users. Most of the people who access the internet today are doing it with mobile devices. 1/3 of the people who access the internet, they only access it via mobile devices. So what we're talking about is a world that has already changed. And it's very difficult for us at our university, where it took a big struggle to get us away from paper and into going to a PC. And then we got them to do adaptive to make sure that they were accessible to disabled people, etc. And we brought that in, and that came in. And now we're telling them, well, we've got to develop or assemble our courses for mobile devices. And it's another change, but it's continuous change, and it's important. There's no reason anymore why you should be developing for just PCs. And I wanted to put that in as an introduction to some of the lessons I've learned about course development over the years. And I first got the idea of mobile learning about 10 years ago. I was in the Philippines, and I was driving through a small village with no electricity. And I slammed on the brakes because I could not believe what I saw. There was a guy in a field up to his knees in rice paddy water, and he was texting. And it was a real shock to me because nobody in Canada was texting at that time. I couldn't find anyone in Canada. They were in Europe, but in Canada we were way behind. And I can remember when Terry Anderson and we got the first mobile phones for texting, and the only people we could text to were each other, and our wives used to laugh about it. And this was the Philippines this is before Canada even got into any kind of texting. And I found out that, and this was back in 1999, that the Philippines did more texting per capita than any other country in the world. And so I thought, wow, he doesn't realize it, but he has a computer in his hand. And there's all kinds of things we can do with that device. And now today with iPads and these other devices, it's come a long way, and prices have gone down. And you can see people all over the world are using mobile devices. And Ken Anderson put this up, is that when we're talking about using these mobile devices, we've got to have a balancing act between the usability and the bandwidth, the number of features, the performance of the device, the functionality, and accessibility. So you have to take into account all of these things when you're designing for use on mobile devices. We need to have fluid design, so as we make it flexible, so as whatever we design, whatever we put forward, works on different size screens, enabling user preferences, font size, etc. We've got to be sure that our web pages that we create or whatever are fluid, so as when you see it on a smaller screen, it works, and you don't have to have this horizontal scrolling and things like that. So the key point, I'm going to say it again, is start designing for mobile first. Not for your PC. The PC is no longer the standard. The PC is on its way out. The mobile devices are on their way in. And if you design for a mobile device first, you can put it on a PC, no problem. But if you just design thinking of a PC, you could have problems in converting it to a mobile device. So now I'm going to get into my actual talk. The first thing that you do, and I just see so many people still doing this, is they're not checking. Check what's already out there. The websites, whatever, computer-based training, even print or video, whatever's available, the first step is to do that. And I see so many, and it's still happening in our university, of people, they start doing and designing a course and they haven't even Googled to see if there's anything in there. And some of them say, well, I don't know how to search out these courses on the internet. Well, what are you doing in a university then if you can't Google? 5-year-old kids can do it. I have a 3-year-old granddaughter who's Googling. I mean, what's going on? So, don't design a course if you can beg, buy, borrow, or steal the course. Don't design it yourself. Take one that's already out there that's available. Take whatever material is available. Again, you can use Google or Yahoo. You can find it. All you have to do is go out there. It's there somewhere. You can find it. If good materials are available, use them. Adapt your curriculum to include cool content. And this is something, I think it's a big mistake. And I learned it when I took my master's in instructional design, is they say you start with the needs of the learner and you build your course from that. And I'm saying, hey, that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is start with really cool material and build your course around it. And in fact, most of our modern education systems in all of Europe started that way. They found the Bible and they built whatever teaching they were doing around the Bible. And that's the way the first instructional designers did it. And in fact, the Bible is part of the first distance education. St. Paul was the first distance educator, and he put it in the Bible. They used that Bible to teach people. They didn't do a needs analysis. They used cool stuff that was out there. And today we don't see the Bible as cool, but in those days it was cool stuff. So rethink that is, hey, you find a really good game. Hey, I could use this game to teach that concept and this concept, or I could use that for this, and think in those terms rather than thinking in terms of, oh yes, here's the students, this is what they need, and I'll divine and develop all this stuff that way. No, that's one way of doing it, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but there is another way as well, which is just as valid. Don't be married to a set curriculum. And we saw that was in British Columbia about 10 or 12 years ago, where there was a really cool video, I think it was on Macbeth, but the school curriculum said you had to do Hamlet. And they wanted to use this really cool video teaching course about Macbeth And they wouldn't let them because they had a set curriculum. Oh no, in grade 11 you have to do Hamlet. And so, I mean, these kinds of things are absurd. And it stops you from using really cool stuff that's out there. Games are really cool. And there's all kinds of games that people should be looking at. And how can we extract learning from these games? And things like Mud Ball Wall are pretty simple and obvious to see what the learning is for kindergarten, grade 1, 2 kids. But others like Evany, where you're building civilizations, or the Hidden Expedition to the Titanic, they're games that you can, there's all kinds of concepts in a wide variety of fields that if you look at the game and study it and know the game, you can say, yes, I can use this aspect of it for teaching this aspect of biology, etc. Assemble. Don't create. Don't waste your time creating new stuff if it's already out there. Is take this, take that, take the other, and assemble. That's what they do now in building. You don't see too many people breaking the rocks into shape in order to build a house. They take pre-assembled components, bricks, they build them up that way. The door's standard, you put it in that way. That's the way the modern world is. In fact, that's the way Microsoft came out very strongly. They said, we're not in the creative business anymore. We want to assemble our software. And I think we've got to start thinking more and more in those terms. Mix and match, take things together. And some say, well, it doesn't have a unified look. So what? Life doesn't have a unified look. I mean, what has? I mean, you want to have, what you can do is put it on your web page and have your little logo there. Then it has a sort of a unified look. And you can take them from a wide variety of areas. These are just a few that we know of and are quite known for finding open educational resources. And don't forget there's licensed content. And what we did, we're having a major struggle in Canada now between the copyright collectives that want to move their fees from $3 to $45 per student. And we're saying, hold on a minute, do we really need them? And what we found out, we did a study, we found out they were charging us for content that our library had already licensed. So you don't have to just use open education resources, you can use licensed material. And you've already paid for it, so you don't have to pay the copyright collectives. And we found 40% of what we were paying for, we didn't have to pay for. And in fact, with a little bit of effort, we can move that to 80%. And we're doing that now. We're going through all of our courses and we're saying, can we replace this piece with a open educational resource or a licensed resource? And we're finding that for the most part, faculty say, yeah, all you have to do is ask them. And sometimes they say no, and sometimes it's impossible. But we want to move in that direction. Adapt, reuse, and repurpose. And I see reuse as being, you take it in a psychology course and you move it and you use it again in another psychology course. But repurposing I'd see as it's a psychology statistics package and you use it in nursing. Or you use it in an arts course or the social science course, something like that. The difference I would see is that reuse is in the same area, but in repurposing is you take something totally out of a different area and put it into that area. The not invented here syndrome is still with us, and we've got to overcome that. We've got to be able to take other people's stuff and remix it, rematch it, adapt it, etc. And you've got to know the content. Of course, the assumption is that you are a subject matter expert in that particular field, or you're working with a subject matter expert in that field. If it's crap going in, it's crap going out. And the big issue of quality in open education resources has come about from traditional universities which have no quality control at all. And I shouldn't say that. The quality control is this. They have a PhD, put them in a classroom. They know nothing about teaching, never had any teaching training. That's the quality control. We don't have to worry as much because we actually do care and we do look at quality, and we do create all of our courses and our materials using instructional designers. So we have the quality. Work to deadlines. This is really important. If there's no deadlines, I find nothing ever gets done. But be realistic about them. You create a deadline, sometimes you can't make it, but be realistic and maybe perhaps cut back the scope a little bit of the project that you're trying to do. But it's important to have those deadlines. Estimate the costs of any project, double it. And if you then double it again, you'll get a better idea of what it's actually going to cost you. Schedule and scope. They're the two, schedule and scope are the two things that you have most control over. Sometimes if you have a tight schedule and a deadline, the only thing you can do is reduce your scope. And the idea is to take an iterative approach. So as you build something, and then it's like an onion, you build others on top of it. But you make sure that you have something workable before the end. You don't build this huge cathedral and find out, like the Sagrada Familia here, that 30 years later it still isn't finished. You want to finish it, so you want to build something smaller, perhaps a little church, and then build on top of it. Like if you go to the cathedral here, they have a church within a church. You can see, even in the old days, some people copped onto that. So, they just keep going on on their project, and it never happens. So be realistic about what you can do. And be flexible, because things are going to happen that you could never count on. And Nassim Taleb wrote his book about the black swan, and he basically said at the end of nobody thought black swans existed, and they got to Australia and suddenly they saw a black swan. But he said black swans happen all the time, that whatever you're planning in the future, something's going to happen to screw it up. It's not going to happen that way. That's the way the future is. You can't predict the future. And you listen to all these futurists, not one single futurist has ever got it right, even on a 5 or 10 year time frame. They have not got it right. Things happen. Things happen. Generalizability is important. And that is when you're developing things, is how can what you're doing be generalized to other courses. So if you're building or even adapting material, is see, well, how could I adapt it for this, and at the same time making sure that if I wanted to do it for that, I could also do it for that. And that helps to reduce your costs. And have alternate learning routes. And you hear people all the time talking about learning styles. The idea that one person has a learning style is a load of nonsense. I get fed up of hearing it. But what they're doing with learning styles, the idea is that you create different paths to learning. They do it because they think there's different types, styles of learner. There isn't. There's different learning styles, but you could have 3 or 4 of them yourself. You could be a text learner in the morning when you're tired, and you want to be a video learner in the afternoon when you're going to sleep again. So there's all different types of learning, and that's really important, is that we look at alternative learning routes. Everyone's different, and everyone has different learning styles at different times of the day and everything. How many here have heard the word a twitch as a unit of measurement? It's a twitch. We got a few of them. It's 2 jiffies or 200 milliseconds. And it's the amount of time that you move a joystick from the left to the right. And guess what? In that amount of time, electrons on a wire can travel 20,000 kilometers. Guess what? There is nowhere in the world further away than 20,000 kilometers. What does that tell us? That God, in his or her infinite wisdom, designed the world perfectly for playing computer games. So we want to start thinking of games and how we can use them. The American military found out long ago that games were the most cost-effective way of training people. And the other big thing I'd like to finish with is standards. Is if you use international standards, your work will be able to be used by more and more people, and they won't have to adapt it as much. And we should all be thinking in those terms of building to a standards-based model for interoperability, to make sure that our work is interoperable. And finally, don't analyze, don't plan it, just do it. There's too much analyzing and planning, too many meetings. The best thing to do is just go out and do it. And keep it simple as possible. I'll finish off with General Shinseki's quote, "If you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less." Thank you.